I've got an interesting message this morning, and the title is Life is Messy. Life is messy. Now, some of you are clean freaks and you go, no, this is a terrible message. It's going to be a horrible next few minutes. Some of you are messy people. You can usually tell, depending on how people sort of live their life. When we first got married, I have now become clean, I think. I'm working on it. When we first got married, I had a theory that why waste time looking in drawers and cupboards for things when you could just spot it from wherever you are. And you would just leave stuff around and you just, wherever you were, you could spot where it was, straight to it, boom, you're good. I've now been educated, I've grown up, I'm mature, and now drawers and cupboards have their spaces. But I want to take a few minutes this morning to encourage everyone about the fact that life is messy, and especially concerning the need and the wonder of community. You know, we've been looking at discipleship this year as an overarching theme for our church. And a huge part of following Jesus is his church, is his people, is his community. And I think sometimes we go, yeah, I got it. I know I need to add discipleship into this little box. I need to get my church box happening, and I kind of need to get my little community, tick. But what I'll do is I'll keep it all neat and separate and tidy. I'll tick those off so it just doesn't allow my life to feel too messy. The problem with that approach to being a follower of Jesus is I think the Christian life is less like boxes you tick and more like being in a caravan with your kids. Earlier last year, we bought a caravan, and I had all these visions. I mean, we previously had done swags with our kids. So, you know, you'd rolled out swags, and it had just been this huge mess. And so I thought, a caravan, mate, this is going to be amazing. There's drawers, there's cupboards. We're going to have everything neatly stacked. I mean, it's all contained. There'll be a place for everything. I had these visions of children just floating in and out of our caravan. No noise, no mess, just like pure holiday bliss. Well, I found that it tends to be different to that. I found that you got stuff stacked here, and then this one's got to go to bed here, so you got to put that table down, you got to move all their gear here, then you got stuff lying all over the bench, and then you got gear stacked outside, and then it's raining, so you got to jam it all in under the cover. And what I thought was going to be this beautiful, angelic, everything had its place and peace, turns out to be a messy nightmare. And people might say, well, why would you do it then? I tell you why I would do it. Because one day when I'm an old man, and that seems to be getting closer, I'm going to have memories that I've made in that van. And despite all the mess, I won't really remember that. Despite the chaos, I'm probably not going to think about that. But because one day I'm going to remember that I had time with my kids and we had adventures with them, and they will have memories with us together. One day, although at times it doesn't feel like it, hopefully Tegan, our boys, will look back and remember the times of joy and the meaningful connection rather than some of the mess that happened in between. In the moment, it seems chaotic and messy and sometimes frustrating, but there's a bigger picture to why we do it. I want to encourage you this morning, there's a bigger picture than this life, if we are willing to see it. And if we are willing to embrace the mess of life, one day in eternity, we can look back and realize, you know what? We did what really mattered. And God will reward those efforts with well done, good, faithful servant. You know, the book of Hebrews actually calls us as followers of Jesus sojourners or travelers. Have you ever traveled and it's been neat? We haven't. Maybe there's a secret out there. You know what? Life is this strange thing that involves a bit of mess. Proverbs 14 verse 4 puts it like this: without oxen, a stable stays clean, but you need a strong ox for a large harvest. Or the New King James puts it like this: where there are no oxen, the trough is clean, but much increase comes by the strength of an ox. And at first that might seem like a bit of an obscure passage to preach on. It seems pretty straightforward and simplistic, but I want to look beyond the statement of agricultural management, and I want to look to the understanding or the underlying philosophies that this teaches us about life, because it actually presents two different ways to look at life. It presents two different goals and aims for life. The first thing that it looks at is a clean, simple, clear-cut life. A life without mess. And it sounds amazing until you realize the cost. Let's consider a clean trough for a moment. Why would anyone want a clean trough? You're talking Bible days, so you could probably contextualize it today to a messy workspace or whatever. Why would someone want it to be clean and spotless? Well, easy, there's no mess. Doesn't take any work if everything is clean and neat. It looks good because it never gets used. Like a Land Cruiser that's never been off-road. You don't need to fix it or sort it out. It just never goes where it should go. There's no cleaning or unexpected. It never gets used, so it will be just the same today as what it was yesterday, and it'll be the same the day after that. Nothing ever breaks. You don't have to fix it. There's no change. It's always clean. It's easy to manage. Well, that sounds like a great life. And we're now well into 2025, and if you are looking for a clean life like that, it's understandable. But the question you've got to ask yourself is, do we want the cost of clean? See, in the proverb, the clean trough means a few things. It means no profit, no income, and no revenue. See, so it's all good to want clean, neat, and easy, but at what price? Let me explain this a little bit. If we want a clean, neat, easy life, we should forget about having relationships because they get messy. And if you do want to have relationships, you better keep them to very, very shallow because there's certainly no such thing as deep, meaningful friendship and connection without a little bit of mess, without a little bit of cost, without some inconvenience, without some vulnerability. Maybe even there's the possibility of being hurt. Maybe, some of these connections don't just work out. And so, but if we risk it and we are willing to embrace the mess, maybe, just maybe, we could discover a relationship that's more valuable and precious than we could ever have imagined. Oh, well, here's another one. If we want a clean, neat, easy life, here's my advice, particularly for all you single people: don't get married. Why? Well, that way you don't have to deal with the hard issues of two separate worlds trying to collide and make them work together. If you want neat, clean, and easy, well, stay unmarried because you don't have to call each other on stuff or communicate. You can just keep in your own little space. No need to do the hard work and to risk vulnerability and dreaming together. No need to go through tough times, difficult seasons together. No, you can just cope separately on your own and drift wherever you want. Well, let's take it a step further. I suppose if we want a neat, clean, easy life, we should probably forget about being a Christian. Because Christians are called to some things. We're called... That was my moustache. I apologize. No, we're good. I'm not shaving it off on stage. It's taken me 6 years to grow this. If we want a clean, neat, easy life, forget about being a Christian. Because as a Christian, we're called to follow Jesus. Well, more than that, we're actually called to teach other people to do the same, to make disciples. We just saw that about our theme for this year, and absolutely essential to being a Christian and to growing in our faith is making disciples, is living in community, and that is very messy. I mean, all of those things are messy. Following Jesus now, that has all the mess of obedience when we don't like it, faith when we can't see it. He leads us into storms. He has impossible asks of us, like when the disciples were with a crowd and he said, hey, I want you to feed 5,000 people. And they said, where's the food? He goes, you supply it. Impossible task. Following Jesus means times of Garden of Gethsemane for us, and they're messy. Following Jesus means there could be persecution, tough times, spiritual warfare, but that's some of the mess. But the biggest mess is that it's impossible to follow Jesus, especially how the Bible describes, without engaging in his community in significant ways. His church corporately together, but also in small gatherings, house to house, the book of Acts puts it, like connect groups, and then in discipleship and trying to take people on the journey of growing. And yeah, all of that stuff means being supported and loved and welcomed and uplifted and encouraged. And it is exciting and wonderful to follow Jesus, but it's also challenging. It also requires patience and long suffering. It also requires forgiving people even when they don't deserve it. We still have the responsibility to offer it. It involves loving the unlovable. It involves doing church life and discipleship with imperfect people. Who knows, if you find a perfect church, you should leave because you'll ruin it. And that's part of the mess, isn't it? All of us wonderfully imperfect people coming together. Who knows, church isn't perfect, but that's part of the mess of following Jesus. We've got to be willing to die to self. We've got to live 1 Corinthians 13 kind of love. Man, Christianity is messy. And so if our aim in life is for this clean, easy, smooth life, it eliminates so much that God has and that God intends for us as his people to step into his best for our lives. You know, this year, don't go into life looking for it to be easy. Here's my warning, it'll cost you too much. God never intended for easy life. He intended for best life. You ever bought something cheap and regretted it? You bought something cheap because you didn't want to pay initially, only to discover down the track, I should have just paid up front. Over my many years, have had a few vehicles. Some of them have been roadworthy. And on occasions, maintenance has been required. I didn't always have the spare cash, so I'd do shifty maintenance or just turn up the radio. That was the greatest maintenance of all. Wind up the windows and turn up the stereo, then you can't hear that noise. And I remember one time I had a particular cruiser, I had a troopy, and there was a noise in the front. It was the front right hub actually, and I was getting bad, and I was like, no, we had a fishing trip coming up. So we just did the trip, and then we got out to where we were going, which is in the middle of nowhere, and my mate says, mate, that noise is really bad, we've got to fix it. I said, nah, too expensive to fix here. You know how much they charge in Emerville to fix a hub? It costs us. I said, we'll just keep driving. So then we did the fishing trip 3 days and we drove back through Cunningham's Gap. We got down the bottom of Cunningham's Gap and this thing is bad. It's glowing red. It's in a bad way. He goes, we got to fix it. I said, mate, do you know how much it would cost to fix it this time of night? We can't do that. We got to get home. Just keep driving. So we just kept on driving. Eventually, we landed it back home and I popped Tegan in the car on one morning to go somewhere and we drove 50 minutes. She goes, let me out. Let me out. There's something wrong with this car. I'm like, it's a cruiser, babe. We'll be fine. She says, just let me out now. This is not safe. And so then I was forced to fix my car. And I can tell you it cost me a lot more to fix it after all that because I took the cheap road. And if there's one thing I've noticed, it's life is messy. It doesn't follow our plan, but don't cheap out on it and aim for neat. Life won't fit our boxes. It won't sometimes match our expectations. And usually it's the communities and the people or the things that aren't neat that God uses to set us up for our future. I've noticed something about following God is it seems that God's concern for our life is not the state or the ease of our life so much as the product of our life. I mean, consider Joseph in the Bible. I mean, had his brothers not sold him to be a slave to Egypt, had Joseph himself not engaged with the slave traders and then the people in the prison and then all the different Potiphar and Potiphar's house and all the different connections, had he not done all those things, he would never have become all he could be. Joseph had to get from where he was to Egypt in order to become the second most powerful man in the world. And you know what? God used mess and chaos to get him there. But had he not had any of that mess and chaos and everything stayed neat in his little family right where he was, he would never have stepped into what God had, which was beyond his wildest imagination. So in order this morning and tomorrow and the next day to live as God fully intends, don't aim for clean. Aim for following Jesus. Aim for discipling people. Aim for engaging with God's community. Aim for increase. Aim for best, aim for growth, aim for fullness of life, aim for possessing more. And so I want to encourage you, there's a few things though that we're going to have to be willing to embrace if we're going to have the messy life, but the life that God intends for us. There's a few things we've got to be willing to embrace. And the first of those things, if you want to live in the benefit of the Christian life, understand the mess and the chaos, but actually have it add meaning to your life, you've got to be willing to risk. You've got to be willing to embrace the unknown. I've got a little bit of a personal hate for trampolines. Now, I love trampolines. What I don't like is the nets on the sides. Now, I know there'll be some safety person out there, and I do not disendorse your job. You go for it. Do your thing. But for me and my kids, we will not have nets on our trampoline. In fact, it was the first thing I took off. Get the grinder out, cut those suckers down. I learned how to balance because I knew if I bounced the wrong way, I'd fall over there into the pumpkins. I learned that if you miss and you hit the springs, it hurts. So you learn to jump. You learn that level of coordination. You learn not to mess up. I hate the safety mentality that says, oh, yeah, you just do whatever and there'll always be a net to catch you. But what about when there's not? I'm in for raising champions, not people that need nets. In fact, Boston, when he was young, I found myself saying all the time, oh, be careful. Be careful. And I thought, hang on, is that really what I want to raise? A careful child? What a terrible thing to raise. I don't want someone who lives their life cautious and careful and worried about everything. So I said, no, mate, take a risk. Just think about it. Take a risk. Think about it, though. I'm not saying be foolish, but take a risk. I don't want to raise someone that's safe. And the challenge for us today is we live in a society that puts safety as the highest value in life, when in fact it's not a biblical worldview. In fact, even for the majority of history, can I say things like valor, courage, principle, expansion, they were considered values. And they all required people leave safety in order to embrace them. For centuries, risk and the unknown has actually been something to be encouraged. And did you know God has a new faith venture for you this year? God has a new faith step for you in the season ahead, and it will involve risk. Have you ever considered the storm that the disciples find themselves in the Gospels on the Sea of Galilee? Did you realize that it was Jesus who sent them into the storm? If Jesus' highest value was safety, he would have said, whatever you do, don't get in the boat. There's a storm out there. You need to wait for the storm. You need to wait till everything's passed. Make sure your life jackets are on and then row really, really slow. He doesn't do that. He says, yeah, sure, guys, off you go. See how you go with that one. In order to teach them about his power and a new level of who he was, they had to experience something that was unknown, that was risky. In fact, when you walk your way through the Bible, not a single hero in the Bible ever took the safe option to the glory of God. Because God doesn't bless protectionist mindset, he blesses faith. And faith understands that God calls us to risk and to take steps that are unsure. And in order to see his power and breakthrough in our lives, we must be willing to risk and step into the unknown. I mean, think of Abraham, who's called the father of our faith. So clearly something significant on his life is to do with our calling of faith. What's his journey? Well, Genesis chapter 12 says this. Then the Lord said to Abraham, leave your native country, leave your relatives and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you, make you famous. You will become a blessing to others. I'll bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you, treat with contempt. All the families on the earth will be blessed through you. So there's lots of blessing, but before you get that, you've got to leave everything you know. Leave everything you're certain of. There was great risk and unknown before he ever stepped into blessing. Hebrews 11 verse 8 and 9 says this, it was by faith Abraham obeyed God, called him to leave home and go to another land that God would give him as his inheritance. He went without knowing where he was going. Talk about uncertainty. Leaving everything he'd known to head off to a place that he didn't even know where he was going. There was huge risk involved in this. Here's my question for all of us today. What risks does God have for you this year? Do we need to risk reaching out to someone in friendship? Do we need to risk maybe running a connect group or joining a connect group like Pastor Craig said? Maybe that's a risk for you. Hey, can I encourage you? Embrace the mess of community. God's best is found in his people and in community with his people. We got to do those things too. Maybe we need to risk trusting someone again. Because we go, oh, no, I'm not trusting again. I've done that once. I tried, and it bit me, and I got burnt doing that. No, maybe the risk is going again and trusting again. Maybe we need to risk serving God at a new level. Maybe we need to risk some obedience to Him in something that we don't know how it's going to work out. Maybe we need to risk in our business. Maybe we need to risk in our giving. Maybe we need to risk in something that He's put in our hearts. Or maybe in this church, relationships, discipleship context, there's always risk involved. We're imperfect people. We're from all different walks of life and ages and stages and experiences and everything else. So there's risk to do relationship like the Bible says. Well, what if they don't respond? That's a risk. If they don't, go find another one. Or what if they reject me? That's possible. And it's sad. But go again. Don't miss out because someone else's choice to reject. Choose to go again and love again. What if it's not what I thought? Well, that's probably a fairly good question, and it probably won't be what you think, but there'll be growth and blessing anyway. What if I'm uncomfortable? Well, being uncomfortable is not a reason not to do something, despite what many people say. Just because something makes you, I was uncomfortable the first time I got on a bike. I'm glad I kept going. It was uncomfortable the first time I learned to drive. I'm glad I kept going. It was uncomfortable to ask my wife out. I'm glad we kept going there. Life's filled with uncomfortable moments. Just because something makes you uncomfortable, that's not reason to stop. That's reason to go, right, I need some courage now. Relationships are uncomfortable sometimes. That's not a reason to push them back. Sometimes we've got to be willing to step out and go beyond our comfort zone. What if it doesn't work out? Well, they're all great questions. But so are these ones. What if it changes someone's life? Here's another question. What if they respond better than you thought rather than don't respond at all? Well, what about this one? What if it's better than you could have imagined? What if it's not uncomfortable? Instead, you find a friend that sticks closer than a brother. What about those questions? Well, you'll never know unless you risk. You'll never know unless you step into the unknown. And I'm aware that there seems to be an increase in, a desire for safety, but I'm here this morning to say God's plan for your life involves risk. It involves the unknown, but God is good. He is faithful. He is kind. And there is incredible blessing if we're willing to embrace the mess of the unknown. There's another part to the life of faith that we need to have a look at this morning, and that's hard work. You're going to be willing to embrace risk and the unknown, but then we've got to be willing to get our hands dirty. And I'm convinced when I read this proverb, the trough's always clean, but there's no increase. I'm convinced that Solomon had in his mind someone that he knew that was just a lazy so-and-so. And he's sitting there writing Proverbs. He goes, I'm going to write one about Frank over here. He's a lazy scumbag, that guy. I'm just going to, never got any ox in his stall. And I reckon he penned it thinking about someone. I mean, the truth is, this is why I love dogs and not cats. Because dogs, they work. Dogs kill snakes, chase roos, round up sheep, they protect, they bark at anything out of the ordinary. They're awesome. Cats, they just use you. They will decide if they want your company, regardless of the fact that they've not produced anything for your family at all. Dogs are awesome, they work. I'm trying to teach our boys, one of the values in life is hard work. And it's not because of someone gives you something. It's just there's a value inherent in hard work. That's why we're trying to get Boston to run up Castle Hill. That's hard work, but there's a reward in it. And we're trying to teach them this value of reward. But sadly, it's possible for people to be alive and to be living as though they live in a computer game. You go, what do you mean? Well, in a computer game, I've noticed that every 2 seconds there's bonus points and a reward for this and your rank goes up and all the time you're just sitting in your chair moving your thumbs and yet you feel like you're having all these little wins. I think people try to live life like that. They want to sit in their comfort zone, sit in their chair, but they want to feel like they're winning all these little wins. No, wins come from hard work. You want to win? Work hard. You want to excel? Give it your best and a little bit more. Proverbs chapter 14 supports this. It says, Proverbs 14:23, work brings profit, but mere talk leads to poverty. Proverbs 12 says, work hard and become a leader. Be lazy and become a slave. Doesn't get more pointed than that, does it? Proverbs 21 verse 5 says, good planning and hard work lead to prosperity, but hasty shortcuts lead to poverty. You know, God's best for your life this year will involve mess and hard work. Now, I'm not talking about doing works in order to earn God's approval or earn God's salvation. We are saved by grace. There's nothing we can do to make God love us more, okay? I'm not saying that. There's nothing we can do to earn salvation. It's a free gift from God. However, to reach our full potential in God, that will require hard work. That's different again. 1 Corinthians 9 says it like this. Do you not know that in a race all runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the game goes into what? Strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I don't run like someone running aimlessly. I don't fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body. I make it my slave so that after I've preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. The New King James says it like this, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I've preached to others, I myself should have become disqualified. Can I encourage you? There's mess in life, but there's hard work needed to turn it into something. Do we need to take some time and work on our relationships in our marriage? Don't blame your spouse, work on it. Don't give up, work on it. Do we need to put some work into our kids? Do we need to put the effort into building godly friendships? Godly friendships will cost you something. Time, effort, money, energy, conversation. Inconvenience, that's okay. They're worth it. I promise you, if you will take the time to make good, godly friendships, one day you're going to need those. The only problem comes when we don't make the effort to invest here and all of a sudden we need it here and we don't have anyone to call on. The amount of guys that I have sat down with and had to talk through dumb decisions, terrible life situations because they didn't have someone in their life to help them when they were at a crossroad. You know why they didn't have someone? Because back here they said it cost too much. I'll just take the cheap way, the easy way. I'll have friends of convenience at work. Oh, yeah, I see my mates every day. Yeah, but are they going to speak the word of God into your life? Are they going to challenge you on a dumb behavior? Are they going to call you on that decision? No, make the hard work of building friends, discipling other people, being in community and growing with one another. Maybe we need to do some hard work in our job. Who knows? Christians should be the best employees. We're called to serve our boss like we serve God. Hard work. It's messy, I know. Hard work will make it profitable. Do we need to take a leap of faith in business? Do we need to work on our attitudes? See, this is what we don't like. I don't like this. I wish God would work on my attitude. The problem is God works on saving me and then I have to work on my attitude. That's how it works. It's hard work and it's messy. But that's okay because there's growth in that. Maybe we need to work at forgiveness. Maybe we need to work at sowing. As a church, we can't just hope that God rescues this city one day. We've got to work hard to reach every lost person we can. But the rewards are eternal. Here's the last thing. If we're going to step in and make something of this messy life is messy. Get your head around the idea that life is not neat and boxed and set. It is a messy thing. But if we're willing to embrace the risk and the unknown, it can become fruitful. If we're willing to work hard, He can turn the mess into profit. If we're willing to embrace the smell and the mess. Now, this is going to sound a little bit strange. I acknowledge that fully before I say it. But one of my favorite things in the world is a ute full of manure. I'm telling you, nothing makes your garden grow like manure. It is awesome. We had horses that lived next to us down in Bendigo, and so we'd go and just collect all the horse dung. Better than horse is cow dung. It's great because it goes through 3 stomachs, so like everything gets eaten. It comes out amazing. If you want the best manure for your garden, go get horse manure. It is fantastic. I love manure. And you say, but it stinks. I know, but stuff grows in it. But it's dirty. I know, but stuff grows in it. It's something else's dung. I know, but stuff grows in it. Here's the thing. I actually think life is a lot like a garden. You put a plant in manure and it grows. You put a person in some manure, it's amazing how they can grow. You know it's true, don't you? You get a person and a bit of life happens, a bit of poo, a bit of manure, a bit of smelly times in life. I'm telling you what, that's when we grow. But here's the deal, it's not just required to grow, it's part of life, and so we got to choose with how we deal with it. You can't avoid the manure of life. It just happens. Relationships are messy. You can't live without them, and you can't have them without vulnerability and risking hurt and misunderstanding and confrontation, and it's messy, and there's the ability for a bit of stuff to go wrong and a bit of stink and a bit of mess. That's okay. That's where we grow. You know, faith steps, they're messy. Sometimes they stink a bit and it's a bit smelly and it doesn't go the way we planned. It's faith. Doesn't always work out like we'd planned, or it doesn't always work out on our time schedule. If you haven't missed it with a faith step, you just haven't taken enough yet. Can I encourage you? The very guy, I said Pastor Steve Penny from Epic Church, they're becoming part of the Calvary family. I sat with Pastor Steve years ago, and we were on the edge of a really big faith step. And I remember saying to him, Pastor Steve, I'm afraid. What if we fail? And as I was about to say my next sentence, he cut me off, as he often does. And he says, you can't. I said, you what? He says, you can't fail. If you fall over, get back up again. It's not failure till you stop getting up. You know what? If you find yourself in manure, don't worry, we've all got it. It's in all of our lives. Just make a decision. It's not going to make you stink. It's going to make you grow. The mess of life happens. It happens sometimes all around us, in and around, and making disciples and raising leaders and doing connect groups, they're messy. But you know what? It's in the mess that there's the opportunity for growth. Building businesses, ministries, churches, that's messy stuff. But you know what? In the mess, there's the opportunity for growth. Helping, hurting, and lost people is messy. But that's where lives are changed. I mean, let's for a moment look at Jesus. Jesus, he's the king of messy. Let's think about his life for a minute. But Jesus' parents had a shotgun wedding. So there's a bit of a secret behind there. Right before we even start, people had made assumptions and guessed about Jesus that things weren't as they seemed. The mess of crowds and people who hated you versus people who loved you, and all the stuff that floated around him all the time. Lepers and sick people just constantly coming into Jesus' life. Friends were dying, being buried, John the Baptist, then other friends dying and coming out of the grave 3 days later. That's got to stink, be a bit messy. His me time was constantly interrupted. He'd pull himself away and the crowds would find him and he'd say, well, better get out and minister again. What about his disciples? They were loose as. His disciples were the messiest bunch of all. They were tax collectors, political zealots, a traitor who was stealing stuff, disciples who were constantly not getting it. They were arguing about who was the most important. They were pushing kids away. They couldn't do the miracles they needed to set someone free, so Jesus had to come and do it. They still couldn't fathom who he was, despite all the miracles after 3 years. They're cutting off people's ears. They're betraying him. He gets crucified for the very people he comes to save. Talk about mess. Talk about dung and smell and things that could make you go bitter. But just because things get a bit messy and smelly and it feels like you've been left in the poo, so to speak, or there's an experience that has a bit of dung attached to it, that doesn't mean you're off track. I would suggest that means you're on track. It means God's doing something in your life. God has a brilliant plan for your life this year. He has more for you than you can ever possibly imagine. But his goal for you is not that your life would be neat and clean and have all the boxes ticked. God's goal for you this year is increase. God's goal for you this year is growth, is community, is people. Don't pursue and don't make your pursuit clean and easy and comfortable and tidy. Instead, make your pursuit increase and growth and connection and people and relationship. You know, when it comes to church and God's plan, his plan is that we're connected to others. I want to encourage every single person, if you haven't embraced the mess of relationships yet, you need to grab a hold of it. Join a connect group. We promoted them. Are they perfect? Nope. Are they messy? A little bit. Is it good for you? 100%. Go out into the foyer, sign up, embrace the mess of people and discipleship and life with others, because in that mess is great reward. Maybe you're here this morning and you go, man, I don't know about this. Can I encourage you that for all of us here this morning, the ultimate example of this is God. And God was willing to get messy for us, wasn't he? God was willing. He looked down from heaven, heaven being perfect and all good. And he saw humankind in mess, broken, sin, dirty. He didn't just dust his hands and go, oh, yuck, mess, I don't want that. What did he do? He came down and got personally involved in the mess so that he could rescue humankind. Maybe you're sitting here thinking, oh, you don't know the mess of my life. You know what? If you read the Bible, you'll find some pretty wild messes in there, and not one of them scared God away. In fact, God created all of us knowing that we would be messy, knowing that we would fail, fall short, mess up, knowing that his life would be a whole lot smellier and stinkier because we were involved in it. But he embraced the mess because of his love for you and for me. Maybe you're here this morning and you didn't know that God loved you. You didn't realize that God loved you even in your mess. I'm not here to tell you this morning to clean up your act and do ABC and then God might have you. No, God loves you just the way you are. Too much to let you stay that way, but he loves you just the way you are. He's already involved in your mess, whether you know it or not. The question is whether or not we're willing to acknowledge it and accept him as Lord and Savior.